We've already talked about the dark type Tyranitar, but now let's talk about the fighting type dark Tyranitar. Like the Neo Discovery Tyranitar, this one did have its own archetype, but it was kind of pushed to the wayside, made into a tier 2 deck, mainly because people thought the energy curve for it was too high. Even though it can attack for 1 energy, ideally you're going to stack as many energy as possible on here when you're using Mountain Smasher. Mountain Smasher is a milling attack that also deals damage. You rarely see that this early in the TCG. Oh, a lot of people just went with that Berserk Feraligatr, which I've got a deck on if you want to see it, when they wanted to run a mill deck because it could mill 5 cards at once, but also sometimes it milled your own deck. Mountain Smasher is never going to mill your own deck, and you don't have to discard any energy for attacking with it. So really, every time you attack with Mountain Smasher, you're pressuring your opponent in 2 ways. For one, you're stacking damage on their active Pokemon, but also you're milling cards off of the top of their deck that are most likely essential to whatever strategy they got going on. Yes, both of those factors do depend upon coin flips, but this is the Pokemon TCG, this is Neo 1. If you're not over coin flips, then I've got some bad news for you. So this is a Tyranitar card that can attack as early as you can evolve it into Dark Tyranitar. It's got high HP even for a Dark Pokemon. This one does have a weakness, but Grass type was heavily used. And as said earlier, this card actually gives you 2 win conditions, which is knocking out your opponent's Pokemon, but also milling them to deck out. Because this Tyranitar actually has Dark in its name, it actually gets better trainer support than the Neo Discovery one. If you've watched my Neo Discovery Tyranitar deck video, you know that I didn't include cards like Elekid or basic fighting type energy, even though they were viable options, and that's because I wanted to differentiate it from this build of Tyranitar, which uses both of those cards. So just keep that in mind that there's usually a lot more overlap between these 2 builds, but in this case I wanted to differentiate them a little more. Now time for the deck list. Gonna be using that same Larvitar from Destiny. That's got the 40 HP, got some decent low energy attacks. Not that you're really gonna be attacking with it all that much. That's why I don't really care all that much about which Larvitar is actually used. I had a playset of these on hand, that's why they're in the deck. I'm also going to be running 2 copies of Dark Pupitar. And this is an interesting card if you choose to use it. Rock Tackle can deal 40 damage with 10 damage recoil. And then if you've got the 3 energy on this Dark Pupitar for some reason, you can use Explosive Evolution, which if you flip a coin and get heads, you can evolve straight into Dark Tyranitar and also deal 10 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon. That is a great attack, but if you've got 3 energy on a Dark Pupitar, then you're not playing this deck correctly because you want to get that Dark Tyranitar as quickly as possible, start using Mountain Smasher, discarding your opponent's cards. So hopefully you won't even be looking at a Dark Pupitar all that much. You'll be using Pokemon Breeder to evolve straight into Dark Tyranitar from Larvitar. That way you can use that 1 energy attack. Hopefully you're dealing some damage and also discarding cards off the top of your opponent's deck, milling them down a little bit, getting rid of their resources so they have less cards to use against you. You want to get that going as early as possible. Cleffa, of course, will help with that as it's going to help you refresh your hand, get more cards that you need after you've already played the cards that you want to use out of your original hand. And if you don't want to start with Cleffa, if instead you want to start with an Elekid, which is another great start for this deck, you can just use Copycat and copy your opponent's hand after they've used a Cleffa's Eek. Oh, sorry, Eek! You really got to pronounce all 7 of those E's for all 7 of the cards you get. As with most other decks in Neo 1, it's up to personal preference how you want to balance out your Cleffas and your Copycats. They're kind of interchangeable just depending on your playstyle and your matchups. Now, because this deck is using multiple Pokemon tools, I like to use Mary as my draw power because sometimes you'll have gold berries in your hand when you actually want balloon berries or focus band, and Mary lets you just send those right back into your deck and get 2 brand new cards which are hopefully more useful to you in that moment. Mary is such an underrated great card. I love it. I really prefer it to Bill. But running 4 copies of Pokemon Breeder as well. Like I said earlier, you want to get evolved into Dark Tyranitar as fast as possible. That's going to combo really well with the Boss's Way. get those Dark Tyranitars into your hand quickly. If you've got a Pokemon breeder, go ahead and evolve straight into those Dark Tyranitars. Start using Mountain Smasher as early as possible. Since you are going to be stacking quite a bit of energy as much as possible onto a Dark Tyranitar, that way you can optimally use Mountain Smasher. You want to keep it alive so that those energy are worthwhile. Gold Berry is going to be the best way to do so. Dark Tyranitar still got 90 HP, so it's not really going to be in danger of being O-Code. The focus bands are going to be more for your Cleffa and your Elekid early game to help stall out your opponent a little bit to protect them against being O-Code themselves, but Dark Tyranitar's got enough HP. You can heal off 40 at a time, still be solid. Balloonberry is in here for retreating those Dark Tyranitars before they can be knocked out if they're in trouble. Retreating into a focus banded Elekid is a great option, as you can still attack, in quotations, without actually using any energy. That way you can use your energy per turn every turn to set up a Dark Tyranitar or a secondary Dark Tyranitar. The more you can get set up, the better. You don't want to waste too much time in between turns just relying on an active Elekid to hopefully deal 20 damage to your opponent's active, which is pretty nice if you want to soften up your opponent's active for a Mountain Smasher. That way you can knock out a Pokemon while you're also discarding from their deck. Bloomberry also has a great combo with Double Gust to help you get out of special conditions. So if you're up against a Speedrill deck, which is a pretty big threat to this deck since it is a grass type, and Dark Tyranitar doesn't really have a lot of options to deal with poison, well, Bloomberry Double Gust is going to be your best friend. Couple copies of Town Volunteers to help you recycle some resources back out of your discard, and then a couple copies of Rocket's Hideout to boost Dark Tyranitar's HP. Like I said, keep it alive longer, get more attacks off. That way you have a higher chance each turn of flipping heads on as many coins as possible and discarding, dealing damage. You get what this deck is all about at this point. Topping off the deck with 16 fighting energy, plenty to stack onto multiple Dark Tyranitars. Among all of these energy, hopefully you're getting lots and lots of heads on your coin flips. This deck can go horribly wrong just from coin flips, but just playing the averages, on turn 2, you will have a Dark Tyranitar that's able to attack with 2 energy on it, so you're probably going to be dealing 20 damage, discarding 1 card. So you are putting the pressure on pretty quickly, and that's where luck kind of steps in, depending on which card gets discarded from your opponent's deck and how important it was to their strategy. And then we have Charles stopping in to top us off. This deck can really snowball quickly, as you have a high HP Pokemon on turn 2 attacking off of a minimum of 1 energy while contributing to 2 win conditions. So if you want this deck to snowball even harder, X-Ball is a great way to do that. That way, if your active Dark Tyranitar gets knocked out, you can transfer one of those basic fighting energy onto your next Dark Tyranitar, which basically equates to possibly another card discarded and another 20 damage off of your initial attack off of your new Tyranitar. That way, even as you're losing your active Pokemon, you're really just strengthening your next active Pokemon one after the other, and you've got Talon Volunteers to recycle those Pokemon so that you're always gonna have a Dark Tyranitar on your bench. With the amount of HP that Dark Tyranitar has, I don't really think your opponent's going to be knocking them out too fast for you to revitalize your bench with more Dark Tyranitars. So Experience All is a great way to just make sure that you're always sending more energy and more power to your next Pokemon. If you want to lean a little more into the milling side of this deck, then Lucky Stadium is another decent stadium option. That way you can kind of trick your opponent into drawing more from this deck, decking themselves out a little faster, and it could also help you out a little bit if you're just want to strengthen your own hand, if you're pretty confident that you're going to outlast your opponent when it comes to deck size. But really, I think Rocket's Hideout helps this deck a lot more. Even if you're playing against an opponent that has dark Pokemon in their deck, and Rocket's Hideout's also going to be boosting them, it's still going to be helpful for you. The higher your HP, the longer you're going to be able to last on the field, which means you're going to be able to discard more cards from your opponent's deck. So even if your opponent is benefiting from your Rocket's Hideout, you're still benefiting more. As mentioned earlier, another archetype that Dark Tyranitar really has a problem against is Speed Drill. This is the Beedrill from Neo Discovery, and like Dark Tyranitar, you can Pokemon Breeder into this thing on turn 2, attack for 1 energy, and that's going to be dealing 50 damage to Dark Tyranitar on turn 2, given the coin flip. But if you're not able to get rid of that special condition on your turn, you're going to take another 30 damage from poison between turns. So just between turns, this Beedrill is going to be able to deal 80 damage to your Dark Tyranitar off of 1 coin flip and 1 attack for 1 energy. Not to mention that it resists attacks from Dark Tyranitar and has free retreat, so it can move around a lot more easily than your Tyranitars can. And in the Neo On format, there's actually 2 forms of Speedrill, the other one using the Skyridge Beedrill. And while not as potentially dangerous to Dark Tyranitar, this one still can inflict special conditions very easily, which is hard for Tyranitar with its high retreat cost, and can also deal high grass type damage to Tyranitar with its low energy attack. Keep your Tyranitar away from bees. Get down in those comments and let me know what you think about this build of Dark Tyranitar. How do you like it in comparison to the other Tyranitar build that I posted? Also, let me know if you have any decks that you would like to see on the channel from Neo On or any of the other vintage formats. I'm still playtesting in multiple formats at any given time. Links to socials in the description. Until next video, bye.